the rather marvellous Peter Lowe, who unfortunately passed away last year, had been the chair of the Buxton Fringe Festival for many a long year. And his widow had found a big box of archive material from the Fringe going back to the 1980s. And we were asked if we would like to come along and look with both John Wilson, who is now their official archivist actually, and Keith, who's the current chair of Buxton Festival Fringe, as they opened that box. And it really did reveal some fascinating things about a very, very creative town.
I've always thought, Netta, that the changing chair of the Buxton Fringe is rather like the regenerations of Doctor Who, and it was very nice to spend the morning with two of those regenerations, John Wilson and Keith Savage.
Good morning. We're here today with
Keith Savage, currently chair of the Buxton Festival Fringe.
John Wilson used to be chair.
We're surrounded by boxes here. Where did these come from, John?
Right, well, immediately they came out of my loft, where there are another 30 boxes. When I first joined the Fringe, which is 20 years or more ago, there wasn't any archive. People had stuff, but there was no organised archive, and looking for something I could do with, without treading on anybody's toes, I volunteered to create an archive, which I did from what Fringe committee members had in their offices, lofts, drawers, under their beds, and getting stuff from as far afield as Norfolk. And I've very quickly got quite a lot of stuff. I mean, this box here contains a lot of the stuff from the very first Fringe, and this file in particular from Sheila Barker. Sheila was the first secretary of the Fringe, and it was set up in 3 months from nothing by a group of people who'd never done it before, and we've got all of the stuff that Sheila wrote.
Very first opera festival was 1979, and the Fringe followed the year after that. Yeah. So the Fringe is 1 year younger. Oh yes, I mean this is Sheila's own report on the very first Fringe, the Fringe of 1980. The first thing, you can't see this of course on a podcast, it's a couple of sheets of A4 typed, so it's a format that we're rapidly becoming unfamiliar with, typed by Sheila, and it's headed Fringe 1980, and then in brackets, things which might have been done better, exclamation mark. And there are a couple of things which 37 years later on, we still haven't got right exactly. I mean, this, for example, is the first year's programme, and again, it's 5 sheets of typed paper. There are a couple of things that jump out to you. That you, for example, it says, in the Devonshire Royal Hospital Dining Hall at 4 p.m, there's going to be a concert which may be televised for the benefit of patients on the wards. Open to the public, no charge, 70 young people in an orchestra. Yes. But the notion that they would film stuff in the hospital to be broadcast.
Do you think it was operations beamed live into people?
As you might have expected, there was a ceilidh, there were folk concerts, there were song recitals and so on. Clay pigeon shooting featured as a Fringe event at one point.
Really?
Yeah. Clay pigeon shooting with the Harbour Hill Gun Club at Harbour Hill on Sunday the 27th of July. Novices have a go, and on the 3rd of August there was an open competition with cash prizes. Doesn't say what the cash prizes were.
Do you still use the technique of shooting people in the Fringe who didn't get very good reviews, or is that now gone?
We've never been critical of anybody.
No.
We really haven't. No. We exist to give people a chance to have a go, and sometimes they're better than others, and most of them are absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
We will not censor nor selectively promote any event.
First Fringe chairman Alan Bailey, speaking in 2009.
The gist of the thing was that we thought we want to do something a bit like Edinburgh, But there's big snags with such ideas, because with the festival proper, they made decisions. They decided when the festival was to be, they decided on the operas, they decided who they would engage, they decided who would be the supporting programmes and all that sort of thing. But the Fringe couldn't do that. That wasn't part of our remit at all. We didn't vet anybody, we didn't invite anybody or anything of that nature, We just crossed our fingers and hoped people would come.
With the Fringe on top. Watch that Fringe and
So now on the tram we talk about Malcolm Fraser and the sort of genesis of the festival. He was also involved in the Fringe in the early days, is that right?
He was. He was the one who suggested that we needed a Fringe, and was very much a motivator behind it. I don't think he was ever actually formally part of the Fringe committee. I think he quite rightly passed that on to other people to do, but it was his idea. He was the motive force behind it.
We opened the Opera House with the first Buxton Festival, and in the preparation for all that, I was very keen that we develop a fringe of activities around the central festival. And it was quite tricky, really, to find the right sort of local connection and enthusiasm to develop the potential, which I thought was fantastic around here. In the outcome, it's very gratifying. The festival has been quite a big international success, and the Opera House itself is extraordinarily busy and has been run extremely well. And the Fringe is one of the biggest in the country now.
With the Fringe on top.
Let's get back to the archive then. So, when and where does Peter come into this scene?
I think Peter wasn't there right at the start, but I think maybe the next year Peter got involved. So he was involved for a very long time. Yeah, and he very soon became very active because Peter was Peter, and he wouldn't join anything and do nothing. He wasn't. He was a doer.
And is there anything particularly there from Peter's that you want to let listeners know about?
Well, we need to open up Peter's boxes, I suppose. I mean, we've got just 2 big boxes.
Okay, and it's one of these. That's the core box.
Okay.
The thing is, Peter was chair for 15 years, or more possibly, and involved for a lot longer than that. So there was a huge amount of stuff, and I did see it in his office. He had this vertical filing system where every piece of paper had a discrete number which related to the length of time elapsed since it was last seen. And this remains because it somehow or other got into a filing cabinet.
And this is Peter himself recalling one of the more troublesome Fringe entrants back in 2009.
We had Jerry Sadowitz, who is become quite famous now. He wasn't very famous when he came to the Fringe. Before his performance, he went round the town putting pink posters on everything. And I mean everything. Bus shelters, telephone boxes, shop windows. And we had a terrible job afterwards because the council wanted us to pay to have all this stuff scraped off. And he got his own television programme eventually. But it was all in thoroughly bad taste, I think, so it shocked some of the people in Buxton.
With the Fringe on top. Watch that Fringe in
One thing I hope there is a copy of is Peter's speeches that he used to give at the Fringe Awards. He would always say, judging at the Fringe is like presiding at a pet show, rather like sort of discussing the relative merits of a hamster and a stick insect. And I'm sure I heard that year in, year out.
I mean, just having a brief look through now, the Fringe has made a huge economic contribution to the town, hasn't it?
The survey data we collected last year, as a minimum amount really, it was worth about £500,000 to the local economy. And that doesn't take account at all of any multiplier effects, so the money that's spent locally and then gets recycled and spent again. So it's presumably worth quite a lot more than that. As an arts festival, of course, we're more interested in the impact it has on people's lives emotionally, intellectually, and that's much more difficult to measure. How does seeing these shows or this show have an impact on how you think about yourself, the town that you live in, and all the rest of it?
Because also over the years, we were talking about venues. You have people like Martin Beard ran, was it Venue 21, I think he called it, at the clubhouse. Now it would almost be a mini Fringe within the Fringe, and then that of course was taken over by underground venues who, I guess Tom and Michael and Yaz, they were taught by Martin Beard, weren't they? So you've got this generational thing going on as well.
Three's Company, these lads formed a theatre company at the age of 14 or even 13 possibly. And they took it forward, they created, and Tom did the writing, everybody acted. Michael went on to RADA. Tom won a prize for his drama writing, and they're still involved. And they're now running a venue, and they're doing theatre in London as well. But that's where it started.
My landlord, John Dagger, for many, many years, he would give a slide. My house is full of his slides from all over the world Yeah, and he used to give a slide. I think he's stopped now because his health isn't so good. But
it was in Kingston. No, Kingstondale. Yes, I'm sorry, the one on the left. Yes, in the village hall. It was a wonderful thing to go to. It was so old-fashioned because Johnny, bless him, he'd got all these slides he'd taken all over the world, and he had music on vinyl, and it was, rather scratchy, dusty vinyl, and the slides themselves were a bit scratched and dusty, and it's just wonderful. It was great fun.
While you were talking, John, we've dug up a couple of programmes, and this is the 1989 programme of events. And one of the other events listed there is the Kingstondale Slides and Music. This is the 5th Buxton Festival Fringe performance of slides set to music, in addition to Christmas shows for the last 16 years. This year's music is Hadley's The Hills, composed in the 1940s, inspired by the Derbyshire Hills, and the slides cover the same area. So that was in 1989.
For people listening to this, we are with, still, I have to say, a barefooted John Wilson, which is important in my world, because John has managed throughout most winters I've ever... I don't know whether you've ever worn a proper pair of boots or anything like that. Do you always go in sandals and
if
things?
The snow is more than 4 inches deep, I put on a pair of wellies.
Wow!
Other than that, I can hack it.
You can hack it. What I wanted to just ask you, John, is you've seen so many things being involved as you have for as long as you have in it. Can you pick out a highlight?
If we're talking about the archive, then there are some personal memories in this archive which are just thrilling. I mean, Sheila Barker, for instance, was so involved right at the beginning that she used to sleep in a caravan on Burlington Road.
There was a little patch that would take a little caravan nicely. I had that as my headquarters. It was lovely. I really enjoyed it. At that time, the Pavilion Gardens had got it was a troop of lions that they'd got. Gosh, it was part of a circus. In the night, I could hear the lions roaring. And it was quite close to the river, the little lovely sound, soothing sound of the river, and these lions roaring.
In the Surrey with the fringe on top. Watch that fringe and see.
What's most astonishing to me, and one of the things I love most about it, is the fact that it's entirely voluntary. The whole thing is run by volunteers. Now, Brighton have a huge staff, and they've got offices in the same building as the festival. They have large budgets. We are run entirely by volunteers. Our annual budget has crept up to £14,000.
Good grief, that's extraordinary. Thank you for reminding people about that. That is a very, very important point. It really is. It's been a pleasure. You don't get, as a kind of punter in that sense, the chance to say to people like you, to volunteers giving a great deal of your time. So, as a Buxton citizen, thank you.
With the fringe on top, I can feel the day getting older.
There's a piece of paper in Peter's archive somewhere. He got all sorts of correspondence from people, as we always do, and quite a few of the people wanted to come to the Fringe, shall we say, quite eccentric. There's a long, rambling letter in there, and underneath is one word in Peter's handwriting, nutter.
You don't think that you're going to make 30 years, when you're sort of setting out. You're just really, your horizons are really quite close, and all you're really thinking is, how can we get through this year?
With a fringe on the top.
Just a tiny part there of a lovely morning spent with John and Keith, recorded for the Present from the Past project. And the clips you heard in that interview were short samples taken from the Buxton Festival Fringe website, thanks to everyone at the Fringe and to High Peak Radio, who made some of the original recordings. And it really is well worth visiting the site to hear the full-length interviews with Malcolm Fraser, Alan Bailey, Sheila Barker and of course Peter Lowe.